So, first, gonna do a little bit of English history, not a lot, but just, lay the groundwork, the background for the Puritans, the environment in which they developed, came out of this kind of thing. But first, some key terms.
Remind me your name?
How we doing? We getting there? Okay, well, we'll dive in. So, 1530, go back to the 1530s. England, King Henry VIII is chilling. He's watching the Protestant Reformation unfold, happen on, European mainland, and he's going, interesting. I don't really like the violence, but in the middle of this, while this is going on, he's kind of seeing that going on with. He decides that he wants, and many of you are familiar with this, right, with King Henry VIII, but he decides he wants a divorce. Problem: the dude is Catholic. He writes to the Pope, says, "Dear Pope, I would like to get a divorce. Will you grant me permission? Class, what does the Pope say?
No.
No.
He's like, no way, man. He's like, Henry, buddy, what part of Catholic don't you understand? So, King of England, frustrated. So, he does some thinking, and he decides that if he could distance himself and the country from the Catholic Church, that he could then divorce his wife and acquire more power and more money. So he does the math. He's like, let's see, more power, more money, get the divorce I want. He's like, okay, that's what we're doing. So this causes him to basically send a message to mainland Europe. It says, yo, guys, want to bring the Reformation to England? Come on ahead. So 1534, we see the start of the English Reformation. Turner Henry didn't know this, but there were a number of people already in England that were, on board, just kind of keep it on the DL. So it doesn't take much, like, open invitation like that. So it's up and running. But pretty soon, these people involved in the Protestant Reformation get frustrated with Henry because in matters of belief, doctrine, etc., the dude is still a Catholic. He goes to Parliament and says, hey, we need to create a new church. I know, let's call it the Church of England. So, Parliament, with the King telling him, you're going to do this. Parliament puts him in charge of this new religious organization. And so King Henry goes, sweet, out with the Catholic Church, in with the Church of England. I am in charge of the Church of England. That gives me the power to appoint bishops and all manner of people in the religious hierarchy. But he also announces he is going to confiscate all Catholic lands and buildings in the country. So he gets a heck of a lot more money. Lots and lots and lots and lots more money. And, divorces his wife. So, he feels like he's winning. And I suppose one could argue in the short term that he is, from his perspective. Long term, he perhaps should have figured this out, but long term what happens is he brings it over to England, or invites to England, a lot of the social unrest, the violence and stuff that he personally found, off-putting. So, in that sense, it's sort of an oopsie for the guy, but, so, these reformers, so I mentioned that he could do just, he changes the name, right, Church of England, but he's still basically a Catholic. So these reformers are like, Henry, you got the right idea, but you gotta keep going, man. Keep it going, keep it rolling. You haven't gone far enough. These people who wanted a more complete Reformation than Henry did came to be called Puritans. Why? Because they wanted to purify, they said, the Church of England. So that's where we get the Puritans. Originally, they are this sort of rather amorphous cloud of ideas. They're coming at it from different perspectives, right? They have different ideas, different levels of it needs to be changed this much. No, I think it needs to be changed this much, right? So different ideas, but the thing that allows us to put them all in the same camp, they're saying he didn't go far enough. So it takes a while for this movement to sort of coalesce into an individual religion, but what they did have in common, these guys from pretty early on, they wanted to eliminate the parts of the Church of England that were too Catholic, they said. They said, you've got some very offensive features of Catholicism in the Church of England, it needs to go. So number one, these guys demanded that church hierarchy be abolished, get rid of that. And they're saying, ordinary Christians should have more control over religious life. That's what they need. He also says, these guys also say that they want to do away with the rituals of Catholic worship And they're saying what we really want to emphasize is an individual's relationship with God. Like, that's what this thing's all about. That's what you're supposed to do. So, in their worldview, one is supposed to connect to God, but the way to do that is through prayer, Bible study, introspection, meditating on things, that kind of thing. That's what they're advocating. Never mind about all this, very formal stuff. We don't like that. And of course, Henry's like, tough beans, man. Too bad, so sad. Well, this Puritan movement is getting off the ground floor when Henry dies, and he is succeeded by his son Edward. Becomes Edward VI. Under Edward, England became more Protestant, so the Puritans like, rock on, okay, we got this. Edward reigned for 6 years, then he died. He was replaced by his sister Mary. She had a very different idea. Mary, unlike her brother and her father, hardcore Catholic. Very, very, very Catholic. Does anybody happen to know what her nickname is? How does she go down in history?
Bloody Mary?
Yeah, Bloody Mary. How did she acquire that nickname?
She was a tyrant?
Yes, did you work with her?
She killed a lot of Protestants.
Are you being attacked, sir? Looks like you're being attacked from both sides.
No, I'm good.
There's a lot of shoving going on back there. Okay. Land be you will. I saw you roughing him up. So, Bloody Mary reigns for 5 more years. Not very long. That turns out to be good news for Protestants because she goes after the Protestants. Big time. So, come back to that, but this one. This guy has the dubious distinction of being the first person executed by Queen Mary's lackeys. They arrest him. He is a major mover and shaker in the Protestant Reformation, and he is in fact writing his own, he's trying to write his own translation of the Bible. He's working on that. And Queen Mary doesn't like it. She's like, man, sorry, we're gonna have to kill you. So, February 4th, 1555, this guy gets burned at the stake. To keep life simple, if we round off, Mary executed 300 Protestant leaders. 300 of these guys burned at the stake. How do we know this? Among the Protestants was a guy named John Fox. And from the get-go, he's like, man, I'm gonna, make a record of this. I'm gonna write this stuff down. So he does. He goes to the court cases. He does biographical, he does biographical sketches of these people. So what we have, and it's been a million years, but now you can get on Amazon today, but John Fox's Book of the Martyrs. And he chronicles all of these people who Mary ordered executed. So because he compiled all that information, it's been really easy for us to see that. Yeah.
When did he die again?
This dude, 1555. And he was burned at the stake while his wife and 12 children watched, if you can imagine. Disturbing stuff. I mean, people, at least, certainly from modern sensibilities, right? It's like, oh my God, how can you do that? But I guess they were tougher. At any rate, Queen Mary dies. She's gone. She is replaced by her sister, Elizabeth. We've met Elizabeth already in this class. Elizabeth I. And she reigns for many decades. And during the first part of her reign, she tries to find some kind of happy medium. She's going, guys, we keep going Protestant, Catholic, Protestant, Catholic, Protestant, Catholic. She's like, we gotta find a happy medium. Let's all learn how to play nicely together. This kind of thing. Eventually, a number of challenges pop up during her administration, her reign. She's not a president, but during her reign. And so she shifts gears. And class, she starts targeting Catholics and killing them. According to one historian who devoted 40 years of his life to studying this particular area, she ended up essentially ordering the execution of more Catholics than her sister Mary did Protestants. However, the Catholics did not have a counterpart to the Protestant John Fox. Nobody to take notes, nobody to go, chronicle all this. So, it, took historians many, many years to sort of piece this together. I'm digging and digging through old records, piecing this together. So, after Elizabeth goes, 1603, King James arrives, right? So, we met him already, but this guy comes from Scotland. Scotland, very Protestant country. So when he comes, all the Puritans in England are like, yeah, he's our dude, man. This is gonna be great. He's totally gonna shift us more towards Protestantism. It's gonna be wonderful. And James comes into town. He's like, guys, I have bad news for you. He's like, yes, I was raised a Protestant, but he's like, religion is just, it's not my thing. Like, yeah, my parents are religious, I'm not. And all these guys are like, oh. But they pressure him, right? They're like, well, we'll keep pressuring. So, James I does agree to fund a major project, major undertaking. So these Protestants get together, they gather together the best intellectual minds they have, linguistics, language, stuff like this, scholars, get them together, and they go back as far as they can in terms of like searching for close to original documents from the Bible. And so from this, they're using these to make a new translation of the Bible. Their goal is to make it as accurate as possible. So they work on that. They put together this thing. It's published in 1611. Does anybody know what we call that today? Yeah, King James Version of the Bible. Right? Last class we learned that the dude has a river named after him, a city named after him, and now we're learning he's got a Bible named after him. So, these guys are very encouraged by this. They're like, sweet, this is great. So they keep trying to push him. He's like, sorry guys, that was a one and done kind of thing. I'm out. Like, not doing that anymore. So, but he and then his son, Charles I, pulled the country away from Protestantism. I should be more specific, away from, they're pulling the Church of England away from Puritanism. So, they're not liking it so much. Not fans. 1608, a group of Puritans decide to leave England. They're worried about their children. They're worried that their children are not going to be religious, not be devoted religious people. So, they decide they're going to go to Holland and see if they can protect their children and keep their children devoutly religious. Like, man, England's going to heck in a handbasket. So even before the King James Bible comes out, these guys are like, we're out, man, we're out. 12 years later, 1620, by that point they're like, okay, note to self, Holland is like England. If we're gonna make this work, if we're gonna save our kiddos, we need to go to a totally new place. So, we'll catch up with them in just a moment. Meanwhile, back in England, 1629, King Charles I, initiated very aggressive anti-Puritan policies. So a lot of Puritans in England scattered. Some of them go to Europe, others went to the West Indies. They're just like, they're all just sort of, depressed, disenchanted, and they're leaving. Most, however, set out for North America. So, there are two types of Puritans who landed in North America. So, two groups of Puritans. Pilgrims go to North America in 1620. This group goes in 1630. So, it's important to understand, folks, that both groups are indeed Puritans. They do differ. The way that we draw a distinction, the way scholars draw a distinction between these two groups, these guys are sort of nicknamed separatists, meaning what these guys that you and I call the Pilgrims are saying is, we're out. Church of England, hopelessly corrupt, man. We tried to change it, we tried to purify it, not working. So in order to make this work, we need to separate completely away from the Church of England. These guys here, larger group, Puritans come in 1630, and they're called non-separatists, or sometimes non-separating, which which is telling you these guys are not inclined to leave the Church of England. They're still, I guess you could say they're more hopeful that, the changes they want to see happen can happen. So, they are pushing for that, hoping for that to become a reality. So they're still going, hey, it just needs a little tweaking, a little adjustment, a little rearranging. For your convenience, a pixelized painting, The Embarkation of the Pilgrims. Voyage of the Mayflower. So, originally there were a couple ships. One of them ended up turning around and running into problems, turning around. So you and I tend to know about the Mayflower, right? So as you can tell, this is showing they leave Holland. They stop here for a bit at a place called Plymouth, England. They leave Plymouth, England, and they're gonna go to North America. You will notice here they get thrown off course. This is accidental, this jog here, accidental. They want to go this way. I don't know if you can see it, but there's this right here is showing you a major Atlantic current. So they hit this Atlantic current. They do fairly well at first, but it's enough that it throws them way off. If they had stayed on course where they wanted to go, they would have landed on land that had been given to the Virginia Company. They'd have been, neighbors to the Virginia Company, but it didn't turn out that way. So, the Pilgrims form a joint stock company. Remember the Virginia Company? That was a joint stock company. These guys, same model. They get investors. So, people like the thing you hear most often is that the Pilgrims came for religious freedom, right? In search of religious freedom. One, it is important to know they came in search of religious freedom for themselves, not anybody else. And there's also this business aspect to it. So it's not, strictly speaking, a religious venture. It's a joint stock company. There are people back home in England waiting for the return on their investment, waiting for the money to roll in. Well, you can probably guess, right? That doesn't happen. Okay, so I am going to show you a video clip. Video clip is from, it was made in 2010, a video 2010 History Channel. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Pilgrims. Pilgrims is a key term, so anything I say or I write on the board or the documentary says, you're going to want to make note of. One bad thing about this classroom, folks, is that we have been unable to get the volume high enough. So there's volume there, but it's pretty quiet. So there'll be the, YouTube's version of subtitles, right? Which are sometimes amusingly inaccurate. But anyway, we're gonna give this a shot.
First and saved hundreds on my car insurance. Unfortunately, I didn't check if doing the Georgia bark at my boss would be appropriate. Go dogs!
Yeah. So we need
Well, at least I checked Allstate first and saved hundreds.
known for pursuing your passions. No one wants to be known for cancer, but a treatment can be. Keytruda is known to treat cancer.
The soil is poor. Little grows. Food supplies run low. time, Plymouth provides the sanctuary they sought. But like Jamestown, there were others here first. April 1621. The Pilgrims have been in the New World for 5 months. Barely half survived the first winter. But they're not the first Europeans to arrive on this coast. 5 years before, European ships brought light-skinned people and plague. Almost 9 out of 10 of the local people are wiped out. The Pokanoket people don't need enemies. They make peace with the Pilgrims. They teach the English how to grow crops in sandy soil, using fish for fertilizer. But they want something in return. They have a common enemy, a rival tribe, and the English have powerful weapons. The Pilgrims aren't soldiers, but in the New World, they have to fight to survive. On August 14th, 1621, Pilgrims and Pokanoket, shoulder to shoulder, will launch a surprise attack that will seal their future in this new land.
It was resolved to send 14 men, well armed, and to fall upon them in the night. The captain gave charge that none pass out.
The rival tribe doesn't know what hit them. Surrounded, they have no answer for English firepower. Pokanoket and Pilgrims find common ground and a chance to survive. Two unlikely allies, a partnership all too rare in North America.
We have found the Indians very faithful in their covenant of peace with us. They are people without any religion or knowledge of any god, yet very trusting, quick of apprehension, right-witted, and just.
Their victory brings a period of peace to the colony. Their friendship is celebrated in a feast. In time, will become known as Thanksgiving.
One of the main themes in the founding of America was a place to do business, a place to expand your horizons, a place to live a life of your own, practice your own religion. Those are the basic themes that brought people to these shores to colonize.
Don't compromise quality assurance for savings or for time for this end. It does get much work. Don't. Watch me skip. Start of a period of prosperity that will transform North America.
Okay. So, they run into a slight problem since they land in a place that they did not have permission to go. Okay? King's like, you can go over here, but then they land in a different spot. So the way that they problem solve to create, try and create legitimacy, form of government, etc. They create and then sign the Mayflower Compact. There's a Mayflower, obviously painting. Signing the Mayflower Compact. So, the point of this is to provide order and security in their society and claim legitimacy to the area they settle. I should mention, and many of you are aware of this, I know, but when they first come ashore, they run into local Native Americans, Wampanoags. There's two names for them. The History Channel calls them Pokanoket. Most sources call them Wampanoags, but if you see those terms, it refers to the same tribe. So they meet Squanto and Samoset, right? Initially. Squanto, so they talked about, people coming earlier from Europe, and those early Europeans, kidnapped Squanto. So he spent some time with them, and then, makes it back to his own folk. But what that means is that the dude is fluent in English. So he becomes the translator. Scholars call people like, and this all happens in history, just like over and over and over again. There's always some person, some individual who can be in the middle and be the translator and stuff. So scholars call these people cultural brokers. But at any rate, so he's like, hey, you want to meet the chief? Samoset's like, hey, you want to avoid starving to death? Let me show you. So, kind of like it was showing right in the video, they show them how to grow crops in the rocky soil, how to make it actually work. So, the short version would be to simply say that the Native Americans they met saved their lives. Obviously, any say that half of the original folks died, but the colony goes on, life goes on, the years go by, and people keep coming. The natives did save their lives. They're also telling where to fish, like good fishing spots, right? Like, my favorite fishing hole's over here, check it out. So they are helping. You'll notice, okay, the History Channel lied to you, said that William Bradford was the first governor. He's actually the second. Why? The fine print lets you know that John Carver was the first governor. Problem? He died in April of 1621. William Bradford takes over. Why is Carver a footnote and this guy famous? He writes. Yes.
Who's the first governor?
John Carver.
How do you spell that name?
C-A-R-V-E-R. So he writes a book called Of Plymouth Plantation. That's what the documentary was quoting from. He also co-wrote another book about, early years in the settlement with Edward Winslow, who featured prominently in the documentary. Okay, fall 1621, as noted in the documentary, they celebrate their first harvest. 53 pilgrims were in attendance, and something like 90 Wampanoag Indians were there. So, 53 pilgrims, 90 Wampanoag Indians. It was not just sit down and eat one meal together. Rather, it was a 3-day party. They ate, here's the menu, they ate deer, bass, cod, Indian corn, and, of course, wild turkey. That's what they ate. Okay. Painting of Thanksgiving. Probably seen this before. This is what Edward Winslow supposedly really looked like. It looked like, assuming the painter was, skilled. Okay. shifting gears now to this group, the folks who come in 1630. The non-separating dudes. So, first, step one is they create a joint stock company. This is sounding awfully familiar by now. This is the third joint stock company we've encountered in the last couple of days. And this is it, right? So it's the same setup, right? Investors pour in money, makes it so that it's possible for this expensive venture to get underway. And they call them, so it can be confusing. The company is the Massachusetts Bay Company. These guys go and settle in Massachusetts. They call their settlement Massachusetts Bay Colony. So, similar sounding names there. Massachusetts Bay Colony. So they get a charter from the king, he gives them a huge piece of land they can settle. You know, these guys they land where they're supposed to. So it makes life a little bit easier for them. One of the unique features about the charter is that the king, at this point, you know, it's Charles I, and he absolutely hates Puritans, so he's kind of like, be gone, I don't care, man, just get out of my hair. I don't want to have anything to do with you, I don't want to look at you, don't want to think about you. What that means is these folks get, they have self-government. So, government of Massachusetts Bay Colony, located within the colony, instead of England. So the stockholders, notice it's not the people traveling, but the stockholders elect this guy, prominent lawyer, Puritan, landowner, to be the governor. So, the Pilgrims, one ship, just over 100 people, they landed in Massachusetts in November. How's the weather in Massachusetts in November? Cold. Right? Pretty nasty, right? Do it all? We'd be wearing like 6 coats. Anyway, so John Winthrop and company, they're doing, their thing is go big or go home. So, 11 ships, 700 passengers. So immediately you can tell this is a much larger venture, right? Clearly. So, these guys land in Massachusetts in June. Much better time of year, right? So, no surprise to any of us, these guys get off to a much better start than the Pilgrims. Things are going much better for them. They arrive, and he gives them his version of a go fight win speech. Like one of the more famous phrases out of his speech, he tells them, "We must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us." So, they've got this, okay, so they've got this idea in their heads that they're going to North America and they're going to build the perfect society. So this guy's thinking, you know, everybody all across the world is going to be looking, watching, and so we need to set the perfect example and show them exactly how you attain a perfect society. So they can copy it. And he's feeling pretty confident that they're going to want to copy. So, that's what he's saying, city upon a hill. So, next decade, 1630 to 1640, more than 20,000, big difference in numbers, 20,000 came. So, early on, these guys are so focused on their own souls that they are not interested at all in converting natives to their religion. They don't mess with that for the first big chunk of time. Eventually, a guy named John Eliot starts, pushing conversion, and so Indians who convert to Puritanism leave their villages. They form separate towns away from the rest of the natives. These are called praying towns, and those Indians called praying Indians. So eventually in time, they do, go towards converting, natives to Christianity, their version of it. Okay, so these guys, their belief system derives from Calvinism. Anybody know what John Calvin's main thing was? What was his, anybody know? What's John Calvin saying? John Calvin.
Calvinist?
What?
He was a Calvinist?
I can't hear.
A Calvinist?
Yes, John Calvin. That's where we get the term Calvinist, right? These guys were Calvinists. So what does that mean? Anybody?
Some people like predetermined to go to heaven.
Yeah. Predetermined, heaven or hell, right? Would you wanna add to that, or?
No, I was gonna say that.
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, you compare that to Catholic concept of a loving God, and this sounds more, restrictive. Yeah, but you know, they're all about predestination. They're saying God's already determined who's going to be saved. But here's what made them choose to try to do their best, because they said, okay, we already know God has chosen who's going to be saved, who's going to be damned. But we think that maybe, just maybe, if we try hard enough to do good things, maybe we will be among the elect and we will be saved. So they're kind of crossing their fingers, right? Hoping that that's the case for them. Okay, so long term, one thing that the Puritans run into that's a challenge for them is it was very, very difficult to prove that you were full-on Puritan, that you were a converted saint. They called them visible saints, was the term they used. So very demanding tests of conversion, church membership, and they're thinking, okay, you know, if people can pass these really hard tests and become full members, then there's a pretty good chance that they're gonna be saved. So, that's what they're hoping for. Okay, so one of the interesting pieces of like the settlement they established, the government structure and stuff, they believe that, so they're looking at it, they're going, God's laws are different from human laws. They didn't want human laws to corrupt God's laws, right? They're like, we don't want those two close together. So their answer to this is to make a rule that says if you're a minister, you can't hold public office. Like, they're like, politicians, ministers. Nobody wearing two hats. You can't be a minister and a politician. So what we're seeing, I guess, you know, something that you would recognize is a teeny tiny smidge of separation of church and state. A little tiny bit there. However, despite that, these guys were not afraid to make laws that, you know, dovetailed perfectly with Puritan beliefs. For example, I'm going to give you some examples. Fines were issued for breaking the Sabbath. How do you do that in Puritan New England? Okay, let me rephrase. You cannot do the following things on Sunday. You cannot work. You cannot travel. You cannot play a freaking flute. That's awfully specific. You cannot smoke a pipe. You cannot visit neighbors. None of those things. So, you know, if you're addicted to tobacco, you know, smoke on Saturday, gonna have to wait till Monday to get that smoke. So, furthermore, the Puritans refused to celebrate Christmas or Easter. They're like, no, that's just too much, you know, puffery, fluffery, too much earthy stuff. So they weren't cool with that. They also outlawed, well, I should say outlawed is the right word. They outlawed religious wedding ceremonies. kind of unusual, right, for a religious group to say, no religious wedding services. So strictly a matter of, government oversight. Go down to the local courthouse and get hitched. By the way, one of the things that these guys did that really bothered, one of the reasons that Charles I was bugged by these guys, for years, they kept asking him to ban wedding rings. Like, come on, Charles, wedding rings, they're just too gaudy, man, too showy. We don't want that. You need to outlaw them in this country. King Charles was like, what the heck? It's like, what do you mean ban wedding rings? Are you smoking dope? That's great. These guys also, in their new settlement, they banned playing cards, using dice. You couldn't play shuffleboard. They banned dancing, and they banned music. They're real party animals, huh? So, class, early 20th century journalist and commentator had this to say about Puritanism based on what I just told you and other things as well. We'll go back here to hear from him. H.L. Mencken defines Puritanism this way: the haunting fear that someone, somewhere, may be happy. So, kind of tongue-in-cheek, right? But he's just like, man, those guys are hardcore. This guy had something to say about every group and every whatever. He's always commenting on stuff. Oops, too far. Okay. So, subtopic, dissent among Puritans. Over time, okay, so, not to sneeze, but because of these really difficult tests you had to pass to become like full-on Puritan, it meant that as the generations are passing, fewer and fewer people are actually full-on Puritan. And so a lot of the parents are going, well, what about my kids? They're not full-on Puritans, but they come to church and they share our beliefs. So what do we do about that? Eventually, they come up with this concept, the halfway covenant, which is their way of trying to sort of link them and say, okay, yeah, they're not full members, but they're halfway there. The larger point, however, is that over time Puritanism gets watered down. Like in England, with all these forces sort of coming against them, they're sticking together and growing stronger. And they go out over here to buy themselves, and then they start, disagreeing on theological matters. They're fighting amongst themselves, disagreeing, and we end up with various groups splintering off. For our purposes in this class, we will look at the three most famous splinter groups, just as examples of this kind of thing. First up is Roger Williams. So, does anybody happen to know what Mr. Williams is famous for down to the current day? Like what he's most remembered for? He's an early separation of church and state guy. He comes in 1631. He comes from Massachusetts Bay Colony. He's offered, he had some clout, some standing in the community. He was offered to take the job as the minister over Boston's largest congregation. And he told them no. Why? He said that the Puritans in Boston were not pure enough. But they're all a bunch of heathens. Class, where would this man have felt much more comfortable? Which got like, what location? If he comes to Massachusetts Bay and says, y'all are not pure enough, you can use the cheat sheet. right? If he's looking for pure, you know, in quotes, then these dudes, like, easy answer, these guys. But no, he doesn't go to Plymouth Colony. Doesn't do that. He goes here. Eventually, by the way, he does become minister over a congregation in Salem, Massachusetts. Guess he felt like those folks there were superior to the folks in Boston. At any rate, he starts upsetting people, saying controversial things. For example, he said that all people, Christians and non-Christians, should live according to their consciences. Seems pretty straight, seems like a common sense thing to us. The Puritans are like, no way, man, don't be absurd, don't be ridiculous. Everybody has to, follow Puritan rules, policies, procedures, etc. But he goes on, the dude is not done upsetting people, right? He goes on, he condemned English people for stealing Indian lands. He's like, you can't do that, man. And he's like, deal fairly with them in some kind of real estate transaction, enter into an agreement that both sides are comfortable with, and so, he's saying, don't steal from them, but also don't rip them off, right? He's like, be fair. He really, really made Puritans mad when he insisted that people coming to the colony who were not Christians should not be forced to attend church. All the other leaders were calling like, you gotta be kidding me. Like, of course they should be forced to attend Puritan worship services. Duh, Roger. Anybody who comes here needs to be, what, Uber Eats, or is that a GoPub? GoPub, okay, I gotta bring the tag. That's some serious business you got there. Okay, well, I do think that's a first class. I mean, given the way society's going, it was inevitable, right? But, that's a first. I hope Grubhub is safer than Uber Eats. Uber Eats has ripped me off repeatedly. Anyway. So, larger point, this guy keeps pissing people off, right? He just keeps saying stuff, and they're getting madder and madder and madder. So it's like, come on, you gotta be kidding me, man. So, this idea, this main idea that the government should tolerate all religious beliefs, right? And again, you and I are going, well, duh, sure. He's like, hello? And the Puritans are like, no. Remember when I said that the Puritans came for religious freedom for themselves? Yeah. So he's like, hey guys, I know, let's be tolerant to everybody. They're like, no, Roger, that's not. Nah, we don't want to do that. So, England's leaders banished this guy for his, quote, extreme and dangerous opinions. And the plan is, they're going to grab him, throw him on a ship, and send him back to England. That's the plan. However, it's a bunch of colony leaders, but it is not John Winthrop. John Winthrop, because he's the governor, right, he's in on these conversations. He hears them, he knows what's gonna happen. So in this case, he comes to Roger Williams and says, dude, if you want to not return to England, you need to get the heck out of here, man. They're coming for you. He lays it out, he's like, they're gonna kidnap you and send you back to England. So leave, if you wanna stay on this continent. So Roger's like, okay, I shall go somewhere else. Anybody remember where this dude ended up? What? He completely bails on all Puritan settlements. You go to a new place.
Jamestown?
Yeah. By this point, Jamestown is old-ish. He essentially establishes a new colony. Today, you and I refer to this place as the state of Rhode Island. But off he goes. He takes with him his followers, right? A whole bunch of folks. So this, by the way, so on the timeline, this is 1636. 1636. He fled to a place called Narragansett Bay. So, small settlement, obviously not the entire state of, modern state of Rhode Island, but he goes there and he practices what he preaches. He talks to the Narragansett Indians and says, I'd like to buy some land, let's, come to an agreement on this matter. So, they do, and he pays for the land, he's trading, paying for the land. Okay, so he established the colony of Rhode Island. Rhode Island enshrined, and you want to write this down, folks, in his phrasing, mind you, liberty of conscience. That's what this dude says. Liberty of conscience is a fundamental ideal in Rhode Island, says this guy. In other words, this concept that, governments should tolerate all religious beliefs, that's set up in Rhode Island. He makes that reality in the colony of Rhode Island. And as you might suppose, given that fact, Rhode Island becomes a place of refuge for others who dissent from Puritan mainstream thought. Like when others find that they disagree with the Puritan leaders, they're like, I'm out, but I know there's somewhere I can go where I will be accepted fully, and that's Rhode Island. Like, Roger doesn't care if I have different ideas. He's totally cool with that. So, off they go to Rhode Island. He's dissenter number 1. And Hutchinson here is dissenter numero dos. So, Anne here moved to Boston in 1634. She liked the views of John Cotton. So this dude is her minister. And he, like, week after week after week, this guy emphasizes the covenant of grace, which is the idea that people can be saved by grace only. She likes it. She's like, I'm on board with that. What she ends up doing every week after this dude yaps and whatever, after church services are out, she rehashes, whoops, wrong direction, no, that's right. She rehashes what the guy says, and talks about it, and over time she gets more and more people coming. They really like, I guess, she had a really clear way of talking about this guy's concepts, principles, etc. So people like coming there, get the Cliff Notes version. And so more and more and more people are coming to listen to her. But she made a mistake when she moved to the colony. She's next door neighbors with the governor, John Winthrop. John Winthrop sees that she is preaching to folks, and without having any idea of what she's saying, he completely freaks out. Class, why would the governor freak out about Anne Hutchinson preaching? Without knowing what the heck she's saying? What's bugging him?
She's a woman.
Yeah. He's like, you can't do that. You're a woman. That's not your place in society. He gets all huffy, and so she gets nabbed, arrested. In this woodcut, she is facing a panel of judges. I know it's hard to see. There's a panel of judges here, and she's standing up, trying to defend herself. At one point during the legal proceedings, John Winthrop called her a witch. He's like, man, you're freaky deaky, you're actually a for real witch. They're having this conversation and she's defending herself, and she's doing quite well until it gets to the point where they're like, okay, well, you're telling us that you know this, and this. How do you know these things? And she said, well, that's easy. The Holy Spirit told me. And the whole panel of judges went, aha! We got you. Because they said, that doesn't happen. That's not how the world works. And so, 1638, she is excommunicated from the Puritan Church. She's gone. So, she leaves. Roger Williams, who's, kind of keeping an eye on things in the old town, he understands what's happening here. And he invites her to Rhode Island. He's like, come to Narragansett Bay, come with me. And she goes, nah, that's cool. I'll go somewhere close by, but not exactly your same spot. So, what she ends up doing is settling Portsmouth, which is, today's city of Rhode Island. So she does go within the borders of Rhode Island Colony, but Roger's over here, she's over here, right? And at that point in time, they're separate. Small enough groups, they're separate. She takes her followers with her. So, her husband dies a few years later, and rumors start to circulate in Rhode Island that Massachusetts Bay Colony is going to expand and basically, absorb Rhode Island. She goes, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna get absorbed back into that. So, rather than wait around for that to happen, she decides to move to a place you and I would call the Bronx in New York City. She moves there. Slight problem. A few years later, there's an Indian uprising in the area, and Anne and most of her household are killed. So she's got 1 million children. It's like 14 or something. Let me look here. Check. Yeah, August 1643. All but one of the 16 members of her household are slain by Indians. So Anne Hutchinson, in other words, can't win. Like, even when she wins, she loses. She just can't win. She's gonna go away. The survivor, her 9-year-old daughter Susanna, who was taken captive by the Indians. Dissenter number 3, Thomas Hooker. So, this guy is a prominent minister of Massachusetts Bay. He ends up getting into an argument. Oh, you're twins.
Oh, yeah.
Gets into an argument with Winthrop. So the governor, Thomas Hooker, they're arguing. The issue at hand is this. He says that, he's like, we've got these really strict tests you're supposed to pass to become a full-on member of the Christian church. And he says, why don't we chill? Why don't we back off of that, make it easier, let's chill the freak out. Winthrop's like, no, dude, not doing that. And they go on. He says that people should be admitted to church membership even if they had not been fully converted, like they hadn't experienced that. And one of Winthrop's reasons for saying no, probably the biggest, honestly, is that in Massachusetts, in order to have the right to vote, you had to be a full-on member of the Puritan Church. If you were not a full-on member, you didn't vote. You had no right to vote. So what Mr. Hooker is proposing would, guys, we have 5 minutes left in class. Do better than 9. So what he is essentially proposing to the governor is, hey, let's give more people the right to vote. Let's expand democracy. And the governor's like, I like to keep it small. I'd really like to be, reelected next time around. And probably that's the issue going on here. So it's a religious argument, but it's also a political one, given the way things are structured in Massachusetts Bay. So, this guy leaves. He's like, okay, I'm out of here, tired of this. He takes 800 people with him. He has 800 followers. They go to a new colony also. This guy is the founder of Connecticut. Colony of Connecticut. So off they go. They, create a series of towns, and in 1639, and you'll want to write this down, 1639, Mr. Hooker's towns adopted what he called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. So, looking back at that, some scholars have called it the world's first written democratic constitution that established a representative government. So, in other words, class, this is a pivotal moment in world history, in human history. If you're looking all over the globe, all throughout human history, and you're looking for the moment when the world's first written democratic constitution that established a representative government shows up, it's Connecticut in 1639 in Mr. Hooker's towns. So, fundamental orders of Connecticut. So, immigration stalls out in the 1640s, but they still got natural increase, right? These folks are having lots of children. Population continues to boom. The population doubled every 20 years. But level of religious devotion declined. If we move forward briefly to the 1680s, by the 1680s, only 15% of adult men were members in some towns. So this happened pretty fast, right? Basically a 60-year time period for one colony and 50 for the other, but major watering down and drop in religiosity. Okay, there are 2 minutes left in class, but we are done with this section, so let's throw it ahead.